Energy Week 2024.
I want to welcome everybody to this city, Cape Town, to Africa. Many call it Africa. We call it home. Welcome home.
Based on your experience, give me about a minute or so, or less than that, about what you're doing on the ground in Africa, how you're intervening in the SME sector, Nigeria, South Africa, and within the sub-Saharan region.
The beginning of our thesis on the concept is that we don't need more banks. That's the beginning of our understanding of this problem. The reason why is because banking in itself, as we've inherited it, comes with certain conditions and rules and policies and regulations that actually inhibit us from addressing this problem that we have. Essentially what I'm saying is that the banks were not designed for Africa. The concept of banking as it's practiced around the world, it's not designed for Africa, and markets that are not as structured, as other parts of the world. So what that means is that we as Africans must rethink the concept of banks and the vehicles of finance and deploying capital. It cannot be just a financial institution. It must be a merger of finance and execution and technical support. And essentially that's what we've created at Moneda. We've created something that is half bank and half contractor. Because the needs are not just money, they're also skills and capacity, and we've been very fortunate to stumble, on this approach. And it came because of necessity, just not being able to deploy capital properly. I've come out of banking myself, so I understand the limitations that exist, and that's really what we do at Moneda, and we're very proud of the growth. Recently, we've grown from the Nigerian operations into Namibia, and through a merger we had with a very successful asset manager there. And we feel that that's the more effective approach to financing African SMEs.
If you look at that experience from the NCDMA, Nigerian Content Development point of view, how are you using the institution of which you are part of to support SMEs within the local content value chain?
And in our 10-year strategic roadmap, we put that as funding as one of our core enablers. And we've partnered with Bank of Industry, like you said. We started with about $300 million that we gave them. And that facility has moved a lot of SMEs up into higher levels. But what we found was that at the lowest part of the value chain, we haven't been able to penetrate. That's where we have issues like the community finance side. So what we found, our experience, is that the market, when you bring out the product, the market tells you what it wants. So when we brought out the $300 million facility, the guys came mostly for refinancing, loan refinancing, because the rates are high and we're giving single digits. So a majority of our applicants came for loan refinancing, and because a bank guarantees the security that BOI requires, you found that the banks too were happy. It was a win-win for them. The next thing that most of them came for is asset acquisitions. So as the IOCs are starting off on the onshore and shallow waters and going deep water, you found that these are entrepreneurs are also moving with them. They need to get vessels and things like that. And so that was the next most sought after loan. But we found something like community financing, there were issues. And that's where we have been trying to modify it to see whether we can actually penetrate further. It appears that issues in terms of the interest rates, We know where the monetary policy rate is in Nigeria right now. It's almost 30%. And accessibility, capacity. Capacity is also something we have been building. I remember from the last administration till now, the focus has been that we build capacity in a way that people become useful. We don't just go for courses and trainings. The ES insisted that if you're going to be a plumber, for instance, we train you and then give you the tools. If you're going to fix phones, at that level. But at the lowest level, I think there needs to be some basket, a mix. We have to look at collaborations, just like at the upper M and A level, you found Renaissance Capital taking over Shell. At the lower level, I think we need to have some sort of, getting them to collaborate, some sort of certifications. We need to find other ways of securing. Maybe we use the National Collateral Register. Maybe we back it up on guarantors. We have to have, like Ejike said, we have to grow some homemade solutions to be able to fit into that space. Because you see, the people that have gone into SME and MSMEs, they are more structured. They can actually go to a bank, they look at the deal and then take it. But those guys at the lower end, it has been a problem.
In terms of local content for SMEs within the value chain, in the hydrocarbon and other forms of energy that Namibia is looking to get into very deep end of the waters, as it were. What are the plans that you're having in place?
It's one thing for governments like to say, well, it took long in Nigeria, they only put up the law. And I'm not so sure whether it is the case that this can only happen if you got a law. I don't want to go to say, look, it's only happened because there's a law. I mean, I understand this is business, like other businesses, but the law can help you do that. But I don't want us to think it's really the law. It's probably just the way we think, the way we look, the outlook and how we want to develop that. The law is simply really to support that. I can foresee a situation where a country like Namibia, we might have this nice law which is there. That does not in itself say we are going to have a local content that is going to be thriving. So that is really just a support mechanism to have, but I mean, there's probably something more. And that something more for me, I always think it's about the entrepreneurial spirit within the country. How is it being cultivated? How serious are also the entrepreneurs that you have gotten? Of course, they might need support to be able to get through the ROC who need to give their support, and you might have them to encourage the ROC to give their support. But I don't want people to think things aren't happening simply because the government does not have a local content policy or local content law, but also maybe our local entrepreneurs. Are you up to what the challenge? Are you up to what is required? And that's probably the conversation we need to have, and not to say we can't do this because there's no law. For one thing, Namibia, of course, we are really a new kid on the block, so to say. We would want to think that our local content policy or local content as it is only going to be effective if we find partners that have done this before. People who have got the skills, or sometimes even the capital. And those are the people whom we would like to partner up with our local entrepreneurs. We see people coming to Namibia to say, oh, we want to do this, we've done this before. And I always say, yes, it's good for you to come in here, but make sure at least that you do find a local entrepreneurs who will be then the person who will then also be teaming up with you to make sure that our local content is going to work. And then countries like Nigeria and Angola, Equatorial Guinea, and wherever, African continent where these things have happened. We've been to Nigeria, I've been to Angola, and I'm actually quite encouraged that we do have local businesses there who have done it. And those are the people who we want to encourage them to come and team up with our entrepreneurs in the country to make sure that our local content is going to be effective, because at least there are people who can tell us, don't do this, and this is how we've done it. And, that's the strategy we would like to follow.
Interesting.
And that's why I've seen actually a number of Namibian entrepreneurs who I can see they are talking to some other entrepreneurs. I'm sure it's already working. I can see that. So
interesting.
When I go back home, I just want to say, how many deals have you guys signed up with some of these guys?
Before we actually came into the market, we conducted some surveys, and we discovered, as we were expecting to, that there was a massive gap in capacity. In terms of successful SMEs and contractors in Namibia prior to oil and gas, they had never executed contracts of the scale required, to even pass a tender, a typical IOC tender. So we knew immediately that there were going to be challenges on getting the SMEs, local SMEs, off the ground, and we had to come up with an intervention. Our intervention, first starting with our merger with Harith Capital, creating a Monida Inno Capital, which is a local Namibian asset manager with boots on the ground. We started doing trainings immediately. Essentially bringing up the capacity of some of these players. We performed a filter program. We chose about 25 out of 73 Namibian SMEs. These were chosen from things like track record, years of experience, diversity of the board, technical capacity of the CEO and the leadership, and the willingness for them to grow long term. Because we recognize that it's really about picking long-term winners, not just people that can do one contract, but people with capacity to go on and build, So that's how far we've gone. And, keeping with the strategy of the Honorable Minister, we believe that by choosing local champions, maybe in sets of 25, funding them, and also, pairing them with capacity from, whether it's from Nigeria or from Ghana, pairing them with these guys, we can drive local content from an entrepreneurial standpoint, even without a law or an act of parliament. We can create incentive-based programs where they make money together and they grow naturally.
The world of energy is changing. So for Nigeria, Angola, and a few others that are traditional oil and gas producers, renewable energy world is here. In terms of the SMEs that have the know-how to handle that, rather than the traditional oil pump oil wells and all those things, do you think something new is emerging here, a new set of SMEs, entrepreneurs in Africa that will need to understand the world of new energy?
There's a company that we're dealing with, Gas. They've been able to do this carbon capture. They got a lot of funds from these carbon credits and so on. Yes. And those kind of businesses actually drive capital back, and there's several businesses like that. They're capturing the carbon and they're producing methanol and so on. The investment has already started reaping benefits. In fact, the guys, they want us to pull out as soon as possible because, so they are getting strong and they're going to mentor other organizations like that. So I see a lot of opportunities in that space for African companies, and organizations such as ours are there to nurture and grow them because our investments are not for long term. We go in, stay for 3 to 5 years, and we pull out again. So I see that as an opportunity, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa.
You want to have a long-term sustainable local content by creating what you call champions. And when you hear, most of the time we talk about SME, let's also not fall in the trap to say, creating an environment where perpetually we're talking about SMEs. But you want people who are going to be growing and no longer to become SMEs. Because, and that can also happen when we are also careful not to try to have a multiplicity of local content company there, and then you've got hundreds of them, but they just gonna continue to just be SMEs forever. And I don't know whether the impact of having 100 SMEs, that impact then having fewer champions, but the tricky is always then who select the champions? Who says, now this become the champions? And therefore you got this thing about, having as many as SMEs as possible, but you hope that they are going to grow into something big and become more impactful. And on the other hand, we talk about having, what you call your champions. And therefore, if you go to Nigeria or Namibia and somebody asks you, say, look, we want to look at this provider of this engineering services. People can tell probably 2 or 3. These are the people who they know. But if I tell you small SMEs, I'm not so sure. So, and therefore, that's again a discussion I think we need to make sure that we don't end up just talking about SMEs all the time. 20 years later, we're talking about SMEs in the oil and gas, but you cannot really prove that they are this huge company that have developed because of local content.
What we need on the continent are critical SMEs. Yeah. I think we have enough SMEs running around everywhere. We need the ones that will transform our continent. And these are the guys making the pipes, the hoses, the valves, essentially.
The solar panels.
The solar panels, yes. Because
the batteries.
Yeah, because if you have the resource, imagine in the Niger Delta, oil flowing, and we can't get valves. We can't manufacture it. Everyone refuses to sell us valves. Then you just have oil everywhere, and that's how essential that little component of a valve is, So as a matter of, continental security, strategic, positioning, we must support these types of.
Well, for us as an agency, so basically it has to be collaborative all around the government. I mean, we've also tried to create some shared infrastructure, like we're trying to do a pipe mill site. And in terms of mentoring, I mean, some of the SMEs that we have grown are bigger than SMEs, as you can see in Nigeria. But we've also tried there's a project we did, Project 100, where we used consultants like PwC, select 100 companies that are the small scale that we would encourage to grow to the next level by giving them what they want, whether it's skill, whether it's capacity, and whether it is funding. So that project is still on, and some of those guys were growing them to the next level. So those are some of the things that we as an agency have done. But sometimes these things are collaborative across the government.
All I know is I think for too long we've been saying there's no capital on the African market, on the African continent, but there is capital. I think it's just the way we think we want to deploy that capital. And I'm also aware of some African capital that's deployed outside the continent. And that's probably the capital that we need to deploy to do things that we need to do that we know is going to transform the continent.
We keep a lot of focus on developing the players, the entrepreneurs and all that. But I think it's time to also build capacity of the bankers. From our experience at NCDMB, we found that there's a poor understanding of some of the mechanisms of the oil industry, especially the marine area and things like that. So I think with the coming up of the African Energy Bank, there has to be a deliberate attempt to also build capacity of those bankers so that we can create customized solutions.
Monida has just launched a fund. It's a $500 million fund in 2 tranches of $250 million each. At the same time, we've done it in collaboration with our partners in Namibia. There's a Namibian dollar tranche and there's a US dollar tranche. The idea is that we need firepower. And we're on road shows speaking to pension funds in Africa. We're also speaking with foreign partners. We know that, to solve capital requirements on the continent, you have to speak to Africans first, because you cannot expect, foreign investors to have the same alignment of priorities as yourselves, and we must mobilize, African capital. We can't keep our pension funds stuck in stock markets and treasury bills. When we don't, have roads, we don't have valves, we don't have pipes, and we can't create connectivity in our markets. So we have to deploy capital properly. That's number one. And we're on the road show, and we're getting very good feedback from the market. We're also very excited about the appetite in Namibia as well, because I think they understand it very well, and kudos to the government. for having that clarity. So that's next. The next thing we've done as well is that we've invested in technology that will make it possible, for Africans all over, the continent to access, our services, as well as access the support that we provide. We've launched just today in one of the technical sessions a software we're very proud of called Musa.
Energy Week 2024.
I want to welcome everybody to this city, Cape Town, to Africa. Many call it Africa. We call it home. Welcome home.